Welcome back to the Centered on Buffalo podcast. We're joined by a friend of the show, and that is Sal Capaccio. Welcome back to the States, brother. Tell me about this Australia trip.
I could get into it for a long time, but to keep it short, it was quite amazing. We were 14 hours ahead. So when it's
Wow.
like 4 p.m. here, I'm the next day at 6 a.m. already, right? Which is crazy. So I'm waking up to, oh, the Sabres play at 9 a.m. Oh, there was an afternoon Yankees game. Oh, yeah, it was a 3 a.m. game, over there. That was one. And then, of course, I woke up to the Stephon Diggs trade. My wife actually woke me up at like 6 a.m. It had happened like 4 hours earlier. I had no idea, and Brandon Bean was already speaking. It was late afternoon here in Buffalo. But otherwise, I mean, just when it came to just being on vacation, got to hold koalas, got to feed kangaroos, went to a rugby game. It was amazing. It was an awesome time, a great vacation.
Yeah, sounds like an awesome trip. I saw some of the pictures from it. Sorry about the Bills doing some breaking news. I was on spring break with my family when that news broke.
Yeah.
So this is the first time I'm speaking about it. I got a ton of media requests right around that time, as
Me
I'm
too.
sure you did, which I'm sure was difficult being all the way over there. But I wanted to be respectful of my family and just spend time with them on vacation. So this is my first time talking about this Bills Diggs trade as well. So let me talk. Let's just dig on that now. What? No pun intended. Dig in on it
Ah,
now. Seriously didn't mean to say that, or meant it like that. But tell me this: is this something that you expected at all this offseason?
no, not at all. In fact, as I just said on the radio this morning before I did this, I mean, I'm if you want to say, well, how hey, Sal Capaccio, old takes exposed, said this wouldn't happen. Well, what person in their right mind really thought it would happen? I mean, there's no shame at
Right.
all, Eric, in thinking the Bills were not going to take on a $31 million dead cap hit to trade away the number one wide receiver. Just didn't make sense. Even with everything that they'd already done. Now, I would tell you, once they did Tre'Davious White, Mitch Morse, and Jordan Poyer, I did say a couple times on the air with Show Up in the Bulldog here on WGR, I said, hey, look, never say never now, right? I mean, you never know what they're going to do because they've already made some moves and they're obviously willing to eat some money. The cap went up, which obviously was a reason I think they were willing to do some things maybe a little bit differently here. That being said, I didn't think it would happen especially once the guaranteed salary happened and kicked in, which was March 17th, $18.5 million, because I felt, well, what team's going to trade for him on that salary? Because now they have to pay him that salary. So it was a surprise to me, but at, at the end of the day, nothing should be a surprise in the NFL. As you know, that's just the kind of business it is.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But continually, I'll get questions and just saying, "Hey, is Diggs happy there?" And I'll say, and I've had so many guys on the podcast, teammates of his, that say, "Look, I know that there are stories in the media, and I know he's had some outbursts on the sideline or some cryptic tweets, or he held out of the mini camp, but." There's no reason not to believe that he won't continue to be here, continue to play hard for this organization. And with the amount of dead money, that's what I would tell people is my
Right.
response would be the Bills can't move him. They truly
Right.
can't. Based upon the situation with the salary cap, I felt like they couldn't. But obviously, I'm not an NFL GM, and Brandon Bean's playing the long game here. And he's saying, if I could pick up a second rounder now, and he said it himself, are the Bills better in the short term? Right this moment, no. Are they going to be better by the season? We'll see. We'll see what it looks like next year. But I was surprised too. Now, there were some indications, some things that we saw doing the broadcast ourselves late in the year where he would run a deep ball, and normally we'd see him sprint back because he's not trying to miss any production on the field. We see him sprint back to the huddle. Will that be a time where he just kind of slide off onto the sideline? There were series that would start where Diggs wouldn't be on the field. And to me, whether that's a Diggs decision, whether that's a Joe Brady, a Sean McDermott, I don't know whose decisions those were when he wasn't on the field late in the year. But to me, that was alarming. It was alarming to me what his role became under Joe Brady and the amount of time that he missed. And then his production went down. Now, was that Joe Brady? And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. His production really slipped at the tail end of the season. He started out as hot as ever, on pace to just shatter some records, and then really slowed down throughout the season and into the postseason. Do you think that was more of a product of Joe Brady's system, or maybe a 30-plus-year-old receiver that's not as productive here towards the end of the season because he's got that wear and tear?
Probably a little bit of both. I know it's kind of the answer you give on situations like, but it's true. I mean, he is a little bit older. I would say though, he did beat guys down the field a few times where Josh didn't hit him. They didn't connect, and he had guys beat. But as the season went on, it two things happened. Number one, his production dropped. Number two, there was a change in offensive coordinator, and that coincided with his production dropping. So there has to be something in there with how Joe Brady runs his offense that maybe Stephon Diggs wasn't as big of a factor. The other thing, there was three things that happened. The other thing was Khalil Shakir started to get a lot more of an opportunity
Right.
and started to take advantage of those opportunities. And you wonder how their offense is run and how it's schemed if it's just more conducive to a guy like Shakir for whatever reason. One of the indicators to me was, Eric, they were giving him the ball behind the line of scrimmage, right at the line of scrimmage, almost to manufacture touches like, hey, it's tough. We can't get him the ball down the field. So
Right.
let's just give him here so that he can have his touches and he can get the ball. It almost seemed forced. And I think that if you look back at it now, you say maybe those should have been indications that the Bills would get together at the end of the year. Maybe Joe Brady would say, look, it's just not the right fit at his age and what I want to do with my offense. And on top of everything else, obviously, goes along with it. We always talk about maybe there should have been a bigger trail of breadcrumbs to lead to where we got last week.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And when you look back at Diggs' time with the Bills, he was very valuable to Josh Allen. There's no doubt about it. Bringing in a bona fide number one receiver was very valuable to him. And I'm not sure this isn't so much as Brandon Beane saying, look, we can get a second rounder for him right now. He's been a headache, whether he has truly behind the scenes or not, they're constantly having to answer questions about him. Okay, can we move on
Right.
from him now with this production slipping? We've already committed to Joe Brady. The offense was productive. It averaged 27 points, a little over 27 points a game with Joe Brady. Okay, maybe we can make him expendable now, but he had some great moments with the Bills. Do you have a
Yes.
favorite Diggs moment or Diggs catch or play with his time with the Bills?
Ooh, it might be the game last year against the Dolphins and spinning around and thought he was tackled and then he wasn't. And then he, goes downfield. That might be it. But, there were a lot of moments that first year, that 2020 year. And I remember him, a big game against the Raiders and high pointing the ball and a ball down the middle of the field, deep ball. Well, I wasn't even there. It was COVID. We weren't traveling. Right. But I remember watching that and we were doing the broadcast remotely, but that was a big year. So I think there was a couple of them there. How about, boy, beating on when he beat Marshawn Lattimore on Thanksgiving, and really that was when you said, and then Jalen Ramsey beat him a couple times, both the year that he got to Buffalo, 2020, and then a couple years later in the opener in LA that happened. So I think those are the moments I remember.
Yeah, the one that stuck out to me when I was jotting down some notes for the podcast was the one in LA to start the 2022 season. And it was kind of like, can the Bills match up against the Rams in this? They're defending Super Bowl champions. And then he goes out and torches Jalen Ramsey. For some reason, that hit my brain first. But I always loved, before the games when I'm standing there, he'd always try and catch me off guard with the football. It was always fun to see him
Yeah.
interact with the crowd. Speaking of the crowd, this is a good segue. He tends to like tweets with the best of them. Like he'll find tweets that have a narrative in mind, whether it's something about Josh Allen or something about Bills Mafia recently, where they said something about how negative Bills Mafia is and they're the worst fan base. Do you think athletes? And I say this because I wasn't really a big liker of tweets, and I always would have been cognizant of like, okay, I can't do things that are going to tarnish my reputation around the
Correct.
league and especially with my own organization. Do you think this is something calculated by him and other athletes around the league, or do you think they don't know that it's going to be that big of an issue?
I think it varies from athlete to athlete. I think we are definitely living in a different age than even when you played, which wasn't that long ago,
Yep.
for that kind of thing. Like they're much more willing to, hey, it's my social media, it's how I communicate. And they're not thinking about necessarily whether they should or shouldn't. I'm not even making a judgment. Like I think there's a lot of really great things to be said for, hey, do what you do, man. Do you, right? And don't hold back. But I'm the same way as you are. I'm like, if I like that tweet or whatever, it's gonna look the wrong way. When it comes to Stefan specifically, I think almost everything he does is calculated. I
Yeah.
do. I think he knows by liking that what the reaction is going to be. He knows by replying to a tweet right before he got traded saying, "You sure about Josh Allen?" and whatever that was. And I heard about it after he got traded and saw all of that. I think even when he has cryptic tweets that don't really say much, he knows they are saying something kind of. And I do think that almost everything he does or says or tweets is calculated.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think he's kind of poking the bear with Bills
Yep.
Mafia or Josh Allen or the Bills organization with whether it's him liking something or whether he's putting out these cryptic tweets. Do
I
you
mean, Eric,
think?
let's remember
Yeah,
he was traded to Buffalo because of a tweet, essentially.
right.
He tweeted something like, might be time for new beginnings, something like that. And the story is Joe Shane saw it, went to Brandon Bean and said, "Hey, there's this tweet by Stephon Diggs. Maybe we should give Minnesota a call." They did. Then they traded him.
Right. Yeah. So it worked once and
Yeah.
now it appears it worked again. Houston's got a ton of weapons. I still don't know that they're the front runner in the AFC. We'll see. Generally, you can get some second year regression from quarterbacks if they had a successful rookie year because you get some extra film on them. These, they bring in Dalton Schultz, they bring in a bunch of weapons, including Stephon Diggs. But sometimes that doesn't always work out when you say, hey, I'm going to combine all of these, star players on offense, defense, whatever it may be. I always think back to the dream team that the Eagles assembled, and then they came to Orchard Park, and our Bills team that whiffed on the playoffs that year smoked them. So we'll see how it shakes out in Houston this year. But going back to the Bills, do you think this pegs them to whether it's in the first round, maybe second round, or even a trade up in the first round, pegs them for a wide receiver this year?
I think it's an almost absolute lock that the Bills are taking a wide receiver in the first round. As I sit here today that we talk, what is this, April 10th, right? I just want to make sure. I mean, because if you listen to this and it's 2 days before the draft, the Bills made a move, everything could change, right? As we sit here today on April 10th, I don't think there's any better lock in the draft that late than maybe the Bills taking a wide receiver. Now, where they take that wide receiver is still interesting to me. Is it at 28? Is it higher? Is it lower? I don't know how it shakes out. I don't know how they can't take a wide receiver. It is the perfect value meets need type of situation, and they just voided their own room of wide receiver this year with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. I know they brought in Curtis Samuel. I understand that. But take a look. It is the one position on the team, the one where you go, ooh, they really got to do some work there. You could argue defensive tackle, but they did some decent work by getting some of the guys and bringing Daquan Jones back and then signing the guys that they signed at defensive tackle. So I think that, yes, 100%. Like any mock draft I do right now, I think it would be basically irresponsible to not give them a wide receiver. And I usually think, nah, you don't have to do that. There's always different directions teams can go.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Bean either move up or move back,
Right.
likely move up, and whether he's willing to trade out that first round draft pick next year and really move up for a guy he likes in the first round, or simply move up a few spots, which we've seen him do continuously through the draft. I've asked him about this prior, and I said, something along the lines of, are you making those calls, or do people know your reputation now and just say, hey, Bean, I know Bean's sitting there and he's available in Buffalo. Let's see if we can move our pick to him. We know what they're kind of targeting, whatever it may be. And he said, yeah, it's probably a combination of both. But people know the GMs that are going to be active. Back in the day, Cincinnati would never move on draft day. So there's no point in calling them. Well, people know that Brandon Bean is willing to move draft picks constantly. I was there announcing a draft pick in Nashville, and the Bills were picking later in the second round. And I told my wife, Leslie, I said, we can make earlier dinner plans likely because I can't see Bean
Ha!
just waiting
Love
around.
it.
And so
That's
I
right.
said, well, they might trade out of this pick. I might not have to go at all. Well, of course, they trade up and get Cody Ford early in the second round. Draft pick didn't quite work out, but we got to make an earlier dinner. So worked out for the Wood family. But are there any free agent? So Michael Gallup just got released from Dallas. You got OBJ out there. You got guys that are on franchise tags like T. Higgins. Do any of those guys appeal to you? Or is this kind of the day and age of, you watch Kansas City and other teams do it, wide receivers in the first round, second round, wherever they're picked, they can come in and make an impact early. Do you think that the Bills wait around, see how the draft goes, and then maybe see what free agency needs they have?
I think that's more the likely play. You know what this reminds me of? Last year, this happened with Puna Ford. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when Puna Ford, they signed almost right after the draft. I remember within a week, maybe, or something like that. It was after the draft, though. And I remember Bean saying, hey, we had been in contact, but we didn't want to do anything because we wanted to see how the draft played out and see what we get, what we don't get. You know what? We didn't really love, and they didn't go out. If I remember right, they didn't draft any defensive tackles, but I could be wrong, but I have to go back and think and look. but it worked out where, yeah, maybe there were some guys in the mix, but never worked out. So guess what? Then we'll call them up. Then we'll sign them. I think this is the same situation. I think this is, hey, we're going to make sure in the draft, see where it goes before we do that. Because if they go out and now they might still see a lower level. I would say this, Eric, let me put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised to see like a guy like Deontay Hardy maybe come back. I think if it's a return man that plays receiver, I think it might be a little different because of the new rules with the return game and
Mm-hmm.
how now I think teams are going to start looking for that. So maybe a Deontay Hardy or someone like that they sign. I don't think that alters their plan at wide receiver specifically though, which is to me, go draft, see where that falls. If it doesn't really work out the way you want, don't force the issue. Then you go back and you look at what you have in the free agency pool.
Yeah, I agree with that completely there. Quick shout out to Prime, our sponsor. They got a new flavor out, strawberry banana. It may be their best one yet. Go out and try that one now. Sal, as you look at Josh Allen in this situation, and Bean had mentioned that he talked to Josh beforehand. That doesn't mean that Josh said go do it. That doesn't mean that he necessarily approved, but he was aware of the situation. Do you think that there is extra pressure on Josh Allen this year to perform and to prove that maybe he wasn't completely reliant on Stephon Diggs?
Absolutely. Why wouldn't there be, right? For a guy, an internal competitor like Josh Allen. I think that anytime anybody's put in that situation, they're going to think like that if they're a competitive athlete. And we know Josh is. I would absolutely think because of a lot of things that have been said with Josh. And then go back to Stefan's tweet when someone said the tweet was something along the lines of someone said, well, yeah, Diggs was instrumental to Josh's success, but Josh was instrumental to his success too. And he wrote, "You sure?" Like I think there's got to be something in you that says I'm going to go out and prove that like I can win even without this person or that person. That's not personal, right?
Right.
It's just the nature of being competitive. Like I think that coaches probably do that. Hey, you're not giving me the best roster. I'm going to show you. I'm still going to go out there and win because I can coach. I don't. I would do that in my life, right? Like, hey, things have changed around me. I haven't changed. I'm still good at this and doing what I do, and I'm going to dig in and deep in even harder. So I would absolutely think that Josh Allen would want to go on the field. I'd be disappointed if Josh Allen didn't want to go out there and prove that, Eric.
Yeah, and I think it's you said it best where it doesn't matter if it's necessarily just Diggs or there's any type of chains around you in whatever
Right.
profession you're in. You know, I think back to when Dayball left and he wanted to prove, okay, it wasn't just Dayball that made me successful as a quarterback because yes, in the NFL, that was the first time he started to have real success was under Brian Dayball. Where the consistency was there on a game to game basis. Okay, well, then Ken Dorsey comes in and Josh Allen still produces. Now, he got let go and Josh Allen produced under Joe Brady. Okay, so it's
Right.
not just the offensive coordinator. Josh can operate in different seasons or in different systems. Okay, let me preface this by saying I don't think this is the case at all, but people around the national media in some cases are saying that this is going to be a rebuilding year for the Bills. Now, whether it's rebuilding, retooling, it's retooling each and every year in the NFL. By saying rebuilding, they're insinuating that this will be a down year for the
Mhm.
Bills. I don't see that at all. What are your thoughts on that?
Reshaping, maybe. There could be a better word for it. I actually think, Eric, you are a great resource to answer this question that you even just asked because you were here in 2017, and this
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of 2017, which is, hey, we're going to trade Sammy Watkins. We're going to trade Ron Darby, and everyone said what? They're tanking. They're tanking. I remember this story. You can tell me if I'm wrong. You said, hey, we were even thinking, what's going on? And Brandon Bean said, listen, like our goal is still to win and just trust us what we're doing. Sean McDermott said, trust us. Maybe it was McDermott. Trust us what we're doing. And you guys came out of all of that of we trust what they're doing. We trust the direction. We trust the people they're bringing in here. It was more about the people than it was the talent necessarily, right? And maybe you can expand on that. But that I think about you and Kyle and those words. I remember going down to the stadium that day when that happened. And everybody, there was this kind of a somber, like, oh, here we go. It's going to be this really long season. And you guys to a man kept telling us, we're trusting what they're doing. And we love the messaging. We know they're bringing good people in here. We're going to be fine. And the Bills kept telling anybody who'd listen, we're not tanking. We're trying to win. This is what's best for us to win. And they won. And you won. And I think this same kind of thing. This is not to that level, but I look at and I read some of the things that are being said about this team and the rebuilding and taking a step back and them and the Texans are going in opposite directions. I've seen that one. And I think, you know what? this is what people said in 2017, even to a worse degree, and they wound up winning because they were still really good and well coached, and they didn't even have Josh Allen. I think they're gonna be fine.
And it might be a bigger upset for us to make the playoffs in 2017 than it would be for the Bills to make the Super Bowl this year. If you look
Right,
at odds
right.
preseason, that was a bigger upset. And look, yes, it's tough when your favorite players, your Stephon Diggs. I mean, my son was wearing a Diggs jersey at the beach the day he got traded. We were down in Longboat Key. He was wearing a Diggs jersey. I mean, it's tough when those guys get traded. Mitch Morse is a friend of mine. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, friends of mine. Tre'Davious White got drafted my last year. Those are all friends of mine. Those are people that I, text on a fairly regular basis, and they're all gone now. Minus, I don't want to act like I'm best friends with everyone. I'll say hi to Dix and Trey, and we'll text a little bit.
Yeah,
The other three guys are friends of mine, and it's tough to see them
yeah,
go. But this is the National Football League. You've got to get younger. Take a look at the Kansas City Chiefs and letting
great.
Tyreek Hill go and all these big names that they've let go over the years, and they win back-to-back Super Bowls. It needs to happen year over year. That doesn't necessarily mean you're getting worse. And so to me, this is kind of, and we don't know what was happening behind closed doors. Maybe everything was just perfect peace within the locker room, but by the indications of tweets and everything else, it seems like there was some issues, especially offensively, dating back to sometime last offseason, not this offseason, the previous one, with the minicamp holdout and all that. So, are they going to be closer as a team this year? Are they going to band together and say, look, everyone's counting us out. We have a great group in this locker room. They still have a ton of talent,
Oh my
and that's
gosh.
and we're kind of discounting, and people nationally are kind of discounting what a Dalton Kincaid can do with more touches and more focus. What Khalil Shakir can do. Curtis Samuel's been productive throughout his time in the NFL. They bring him in. This is an offensive line that, yeah, you're sliding Connor McGovern into center, and you lose Mitch Morse, a Pro Bowl center, but look, he can play too. This offense is going to be fine. And then defensively, they'll retool. They've brought in some youth. And look, it stinks the guys that they've had to let go. But I think this team is going to be more than fine. I think you said it best that, similar to that 2017 time, this will be a time where guys band together, come together,
Mhm.
and I don't think this is a rebuild phase at all. Is it a retooling? Yes, but that's a necessary evil within today's NFL. You cannot keep the same team year over year, especially with the way the salary cap and everything else works. So
I give the Bills, I give Brandon Bean credit for having to make these tough decisions and doing it. And look, you brought up the Chiefs. That's right. The Chiefs were a much different team and roster this Super Bowl than they were when they won their first Super Bowl. But they had to make decisions, tough decisions. Tyreek Hill was one of them. I'm not saying the Bills are the Patriots, of course not, right? The Patriots have, the greatest dynasty we've ever seen in sports. But through their run of 20 years, every 4 or 5 years, they totally reshape their team and have a different type of team and win a different type of way. And you have to do that while you have Josh Allen, the one constant for that long. And that's what they're trying to do now.
yeah, and that's the key. When you have the quarterback in place, you can do that. And yes, you could say that once they get past their rookie window, now you got to pay them so much, it's hard to surround them with as much talent. But I'll take a Josh Allen and give me him on a $70 million cap hit a year, and that's fine. Give me that guy, a Mahomes, a Burrow, and there's a few others out there that you give me them, I'll roll with them, and we can put talent, put the right guys around him, and it's still going to be a productive team. Sal, I know you're, and based upon my shirt, for those watching on YouTube, I got my Masters shirt on. This podcast is going to release on Masters Thursday,
Ooh, yeah.
opening day. Do you have a Masters pick for this year?
Well, I've been in Australia and haven't studied it, but doesn't matter because the default has got to be either John Rahm or Scotty Scheffler. I mean, how can you go against it, those guys? They're so good, right? They're so good at what they do. It's incredible watching them every week.
Yeah, it truly is. And to me, going back to the Ryder Cup last year over in Rome, watching Scotty and Scheffler duel it out, and I know Rom's over on the Live Tour now, so they don't get to duel it out on a weekly basis. But that's almost going to make these majors more fun now because you'll kind of get that Live PGA Tour rivalry. See these guys face back off together. Yeah, I like Rom. I like Scotty. A couple not sleepers. Xander Schauffele. He's coming second. He's coming third. He's had 3 top fives, I believe, in the last 5 years. But then he missed the cut came in 17th and maybe missed the cut the other times. I'm trying to rack my brain on those. But regardless, Xander Schauffele would be one. I'm a medalist country club, medalist golf club member. So is he. And then Cam Smith would be
Yeah.
another one. He just puts the
Yeah.
lights out. And I'll say this about John Rahm. You got to be very careful what you say. And I'm going to try and say this correctly, but I got to play 3 rounds of golf with him down in
Amazing.
Georgia
It's
2 weeks
awesome.
ago. And his game looks sharp. So I'm excited to see him
That's great.
show out. And yeah, I posted a picture on my Instagram so people can
Saw it.
do
You and
some
your family with them. It's cool.
do some deductive reasoning. This so my family picked me up on their way to spring break as I got to finish 3 days of golf in Georgia. So once in a lifetime trip for me, once in a lifetime trip for you. We're regrouping on the back end of that. A
Yes.
little late on this dig stuff, but providing a little different perspective than probably what people are hearing on ESPN on a day-to-day basis. I was down in my workout room this morning and had ESPN on, and they're still talking about it. It's not draft
Well,
talk. It's, pressure on Josh Allen. It's dig straight and whatnot.
the thing is, Eric, too, and I just said this morning, my first day back and being on the radio, and I said, we live in such a instant reaction. Everybody's got to have a quick take society. It was, I was glad for something like this. I actually sat back for 6 days. And I didn't have a quick reaction. I did do a podcast with Matt Bove that day on it, and we kind of walked through it a little bit, but I kind of consumed everything that everybody else was saying. And then I went back and thought about it. It wasn't an instant reaction for me. It was my reaction and where I settled was, I just think, it doesn't always have to be a blame game, does it? When something, when two people, two parties, anybody separate and have a relationship, it doesn't always have to be someone's blamed, even though everybody wants someone to be blamed. Sometimes just the relationship runs its course and you just realize you're better off without each other than you are with each other, even though at one time you were so much better with each other.
Don't take that advice out there if you're like on the fringe of your relationship with with your husband or wife. We're going to try and keep marriages together, but
Yes.
that is very well
It does
stated.
happen though, where I will say though, Eric, and I've talked about this with my wife, Yana, before. Like we've seen people, as you have in your life, that
Yeah.
have gotten divorced, whether that's been, early on in their marriage or later in their marriage. And sometimes you say, man, but they seem so happy. And you say, you don't know what happens in any relationship, but sometimes people grow apart. They really do.
Hmm.
And that just happens. It doesn't have to be because someone did something really horrible. A lot of times it's just a lot of little things that just add up and you say, we're just not right for each other at this time. So I agree with you. Don't use that as an excuse to do it, but you do understand sometimes when it happens.
Yeah. Centered on Buffalo podcast, you're going to get football, golf, and marriage talk
That's
all in
right.
one. Sal, I appreciate the time. As always, that was fun catching up. Glad you're back in the States safe and sound. We'll have to get together soon.
Absolutely, buddy. Looking forward to it. Thank you very much. And now that I can, I got my pacemaker back on Valentine's Day, and I could not play golf. They said for 6 weeks, even in a driving range or anything, because of the motion and pulling the leads out. Finally, I'm able to. I'm going down to Florida in a few weeks and I'll play golf with my friends. I haven't been able to do it. I'm going to start swinging a club again.
Good for you. You might have that magic first round back after a long
That's right.
layoff and really hit him good that time. So hit him straight out there, brother.
Thanks, buddy.